SwayamPrabha. Digital India. Educated India.
I am Devojit Kumar Sharma. I will be taking this particular topic for discussion today on theories of crime as part of the course on Criminology, Penology and Victimology. To discuss about the theories of crime, we need to refer back to what we discussed as part of the positivist school in criminology, because the ideas which were laid down as part of the positivist criminology have been specifically talked about in different theories that we are going to discuss today. Meaning thereby, the theories that we have or we are going to discuss today, so far as crime is concerned, are more or less coming under the broader ambit of positivist school. Now, why do I say that this theory should come under the broader ambit of the positive school of criminology? Because all these theories are more or less trying to define crime, or more specifically they are trying to identify the cause or the reason behind the commission of crime. If you recall our discussion during the last class, we mentioned that be it biological positivism, be it psychological positivism, be it sociological positivism or the other economic explanation of crime, all these theories have more or less tried to interpret why people commit crime and what are the possible reasons for the commission of crime. It is so important that we not only look at the schools which only gives us an outline of the philosophical underpinnings of criminal justice administration or system at a point of time, but also we further go into the details of the theories, so as to have a holistic understanding about why there is crime in the society. I have already told you that there cannot be one singular reason of crime or the reason behind the commission of crime. There could be hundreds of explanations, and the theories of crime are nothing but few of those many explanations of why people commit crime. An old saying goes that hate the crime, not the criminal, hate the sin, not the sinner. That is what Gandhiji even talked about. That means, as a student of criminology, we need to give our emphasis, or we need to give our focus more on the the crime, the reasons behind the commission of crime, rather than the crime in itself. That means, the understanding which need to be imbibed by us is that a person commits crime not because of anything, but maybe because of certain reasons or compulsion which may be influencing that person to commit the crime. Now, these theories of crime are important because the crime is a phenomena which is inevitable in any society. We have already seen during our last discussion that at every stage of human civilization, crime as a phenomena always existed. So is with the explanation of crime. From those ancient days even till today, we are trying to identify why people commit crime. So, as the phenomena of crime is not static, it is ever changing, so is with the theories of crime, which are not static, which keep changing. A particular theory of crime, if it works well in one particular context, the same theory may not work well in another context. Reasons may be because of contextual factors. So, the applicability or the application of these theories would depend on lot of other factors, considering the context in which we are applying the theories that we want to apply. Now, the very extent of crime in the society has been enumerated by the state agencies. Say for instance, in case of India, we have something called Crime in India, which is a publication of the government of India. They basically depicts the picture of the kinds of crimes which are committed, maybe under IPC, maybe under special and local law. They have also further categorized crimes into different categories. Now, that is the extent, but what perhaps is not given in many places is that reasons behind the commission of crime, why people commit crime. Now, one of the important, I would say, the social thinkers, he happens to be Emile Durkheim, who said that crime occurs because the conscience collective, and what is that conscience collective? It is nothing but the collective conscience of the society at large, that is the totality of beliefs and value system or the sentiments common to the large mass of people or an average number of society becomes tired or weakens. It is at that point of time when the punishment is given to any person who commits crime, that conscience collective happens to get rejuvenated. It is something very interesting explanation altogether. That means the value system, the sentiments of a given society at a given point of time, when it get weakens, there is the need which arises for the punishment to be imposed or inflicted, so that the conscience collective gets rejuvenated. And what happens is the state, it exercises its power of awarding punishment by virtue of the authority given to it by the law of the land to control over that conscience collective, or what we call it as social control. And the state draws that legitimacy. What I mean to say here is that legal legitimacy from that very conscience collective only. And in case of a democratic state or nation like ours, it is more obvious. If we say the police happens to be an organ of the state. In fact, the police happens to be the state's prisons and police, these are the state subjects. Now, what happens is that the manner in which the state wants the conscience collective to be controlled or rather regulated is they do it through the machinery of police, and the police draws its legitimacy as an instrumentality of the state from the laws of the land and mostly the code of criminal procedure to exercise its powers and functions. Now, Durkheim further said the whole phenomena of crime, they always existed, and even a society which composed of person with angelic qualities would not be free from the volitions of norms of the society or the violations of the norms of the society. That means one cannot expect a society without crime. It is something like expecting human living without disease, something like that, something when you cannot think of a human life without falling ill or falling sick sometime. Similarly, it is very difficult to think of a society where there would be no crime. Of course, the intensity and the gravity and the nature of crime may vary from place to place, and at times anything that is wrong to the eyes of the conscious collective or the society may not be defined as crime at a particular point of time. If I have to give an example of the section 498A of the Indian Penal Code, this was inserted by an amendment in the IPC in the 80s, but it does not mean that the behavior which has been proscribed or what is being prohibited by 498A IPC, such kind of behaviors were not there at the earlier time. That means, times before the 1980s where this particular amendment was made. But then society realized that it needed a definite provision as part of the general statutes, that is the Indian Penal Code, only way back in 1980s for a specific provision pertaining to the kind of behavior which has been prescribed under 498A. So, what I am trying to bring to your notice here is the fact that it keeps changing the manner in which we want to see what is wrong today, it may not be a wrong tomorrow. You have innumerable cases decided by the court, you have many of the provisions under the Indian Penal Code which have been held to be unconstitutional at times, which have been also there have been amendment, and there have been a lot of changes, there have been a lot of debate and discourses regarding the validity or the constitutionality. The one is the death penalty thing. So, the point I am trying to help you understand here is that it is something that cannot be said in a very definite term that this is crime for for the times to come, or this needs to be defined as crime for all the times to come. So, it is an evolving concept, it is an ever changing concept. So is the way of looking at crime, or so is the way of theorizing about crime. And as I have said, the very concept of crime changes with the values of the society, with the changes in the norms of the societies, in the manner in which we look at the societal relation. If you recall our last lecture, I told you that this criminology is premised or grounded on a very conflict situation between an individual and a society. But the point remains that why there is a conflict. Now, do you not have the means or enough of resources to address those conflicting concerns at our own level rather than going for a legal solution to those conflicts? The answer may be yes. In today's context, in many of the concerns that we may have so far as conflict between individual and society are being resolved by means other than the courts and adjudication. Now, when I told you about the values and the norms which keep changing, so is with the definition of crime, so is with the different theories of crime. Now, something that was always there in the society is called deviance. Deviance is something that when we deviate from the societal norms. Now, when we conform to it, it is called conformity. I mean, when we go apart from the social norms, we are said to be deviants. And whenever there are deviancy, no conformity, there is the need for social control, and state exercises its legitimate power of social control through the very instrumentality of law, or to the what is being empowered by law the law empowers the state to maintain that social control or to kind of maintain a peace and harmonious relation between different persons in the society. In fact, in case of India, there is the constitutional obligation of the state to protect the right to life and liberty of people living in the country. Now, social norms are again the general percepts which being internalized or accepted by the individuals to induce conformity and increase group unity. These are products of collective struggle for existence. So, the fact remains that law is nothing but more of a codified or an advanced version of those collective norms or the codified societal norms. Now, in this particular backdrop, when we intend to understand why people commit crime and what could be the reason, it takes us to the mainstream criminological discussions on this point of, in this point of reference. That means, what does mainstream criminology kind of mention about or talk about this? When you say mainstream criminology, we often understand the sociological and the political explanation of crime. It is the situation is that somehow we have started discarding the biological explanation of crime, given by persons like Lombroso, Enrico Ferri and Garofalo. I mean, this is the very situation that we are living today. We are relying more and more on sociological and political explanation rather than biological factors, but the advancement in research in medical sciences and other scientific disciplines are indicating the fact that the biological factors may be equally responsible. In fact, there are ample of research studies undertaken and successfully concluded that psychological factors are to a great extent responsible for people to commit crime. Now, going back to the biological factors play an equally significant role in the development of antisocial behavior and should therefore be considered accordingly. Now, what happened was that when this whole debate about whether the sociological theories or the political theories are better than the biological theories and the psychological theories, it so happened that the majority of the mainstream theories or the people who are concerned with criminology, they started discarding and they started showing a lack of interest, because there was a lack of knowledge regarding the functioning of human brain and by also serious methodological shortcomings so far as the biological explanation of crime is concerned. But nevertheless, we cannot completely negate the importance and the significance of the biological theories, because it was the starting point. It was the starting point so far as the scientific inquiry into the realm of crime and justice in the world at large. As we have already indicated, we have already discussed as part of our Schools of Criminology lecture, that Lombroso, who was primarily a professor of legal medicine at the University of Turin, in his particular book on that is The Criminal Man, proposed that criminals were biological throwbacks to an earlier evolutionary stage, and as such persons were more primitive and less evolved than their counterparts. This is something, he coined this particular term called atavistic, that means the born criminals. And who are those atavistic? These people reversions to a lower or more primitive evolutionary form of development. That is what Lombroso believed in. And it is not that Lombroso stood by what he believed in because all the time in his life, but because later on he also incorporated other factors which may be equally responsible for people to commit crime. But the starting point was that he laid emphasis on this aspect called born criminals or the atavistic reversions to a lower or more primitive evolutionary form of development. He also talked about insane criminals, criminaloids, and so is the meaning of these terms. Insane criminals were those who were idiots afflicted with general paralysis, etc., and criminaloids were those do not suffer from any disorder, but their emotional and mental makeup are such that under certain circumstances they tend to commit crime. Now, apart from Lombroso, I did mention to you about Enrico Ferri also, and Ferri relied upon the anthropological, geographical and psychological and economic factors in explaining criminal behavior, and he categorized criminals into insane, born and habitual, and criminals by patient into these 4 categories. Then came amongst those trinity of like a positivist school, the Guerra fellow, who categorized criminals into endemic criminals deficient in probity, lascivious criminals and violent criminals. These were the categorization he made. Now, what is happening today? In the recent advancement in science and other related field, the biological aspects of criminal behavior have been investigated by numerous behavioral scientists employing a multidisciplinary approach that promises for an enhanced kind of understanding of the factors behind people to commit crime. Scientists in the field of genetics, biochemistry, neuroscience and other related fields have been intensively studying aspects of human behavior that are relevant to the criminologist and the criminal justice practitioner. That means, the research is still on so far as the explanation of biological factors in the making of criminal is concerned, and the story of course does not end here, still it is going on, and let us hope that there would be some more interesting findings from the research being undertaken in the times to come. Now, one of the issues which often surface so far as the biological explanation of crime is concerned, that is the debate relating to nature or nurture. That means, when we rely on biological explanation, we come to a conclusion that it is because of the nature of the person that what makes the person to commit, or what actually influences, or what prompts the person, or what compels the person to commit crime. Whereas, the environmentalists argue that more than the nature, it is the nurture what is important. That means, the manner in which people are being brought up, the surrounding. This debate still goes on. There is a school of thought which is more kind of which is more vocal about the nature aspect. That means, whether human behavior is a product of nature or nurture. Now, the group which is more advocating in terms of the nature aspect of it, they claim that nature contributes prominently or predominantly to an individual behavior, and they are more of hereditarians. And in this particular discourse, it is said that behavior was primarily attributed to the inherited predispositions and genetic influences, and these influences and dispositions are to a great extent responsible for people to commit crime. Whereas, the environmentalists, as I have told you, they are more toward explaining the criminal behavior or such kind of antisocial behavior in terms of the manner in which people are being brought up and their upbringing. Now, for instance, if I have to quote Watson, who interpreted his interpretation of John Locke's tabula rasa, that is a blank slate, for example, maintained that humans are born without predisposition to behave in a predetermined or predictable manner. Environmental inputs were considered primarily responsible for the final behavior product, and manipulation of external inputs were thought to modify behavior. This was something that was laid down by Watson. Now, what is the way out? The way out is something that lies between the both, that is the debate between nature versus nurture. Perhaps, if we take a stand in between that debate, somewhere between it, perhaps we will find a more logical answer to it. There is another thing, that is the free will or determinism. That means, whether people commit crime because of their own volition or for the factors which may be not related to their free will. That is again a debate which surfaces often when it comes to the biological school. For example, a child with learning disability may function well in society, but what happens is that with the addition of family instability and lack of appropriate educational programs, that child may become more of a delinquent one, and he may more prone to maladjustive kind of a personality behavior, and his actions may in future result into a kind of deviant one also. Now, there are other explanations in criminology so far the biological school is concerned, and which we can call them as the biological theories, such as twin studies, then adopted children studies, then biochemical theories. Now, all these theories are more or less relying on the fact that the factors within the individual or within the person, that is the internal factors. That is why we call the biological theories and the psychological theories as the individualistic theories. That means, the cause or the reason of the crime lies within the individual in itself. Now, going to the psychological theories. Again, these psychological theories are also relying more on the factors internal to an individual or to a person. And the famous theory of id, ego and superego, given by none other than Sigmund Freud, is one of the most celebrated theories, though this theory was not central to criminology at that point of time when this was given, but then we have adopted, or the criminological studies have hugely benefited from the Sigmund Freud's theory. And when he talked about this concept called id, ego and superego, and this theory is called as psychoanalysis theory. Now, what he told was the criminal behavior is the product of inadequacies inherent in offender's personality, and the significant inadequacies may result in the full blown mental illness, which itself can be a direct cause of crime. That means, if the id component in the personality or the ego or the superego component are not adequately taken care of, or there are certain inadequacies so far as the fulfillment of this id, ego and superego desires or expectation to a particular person concerned, this may result in some of the maladjustive kind of nature or behavior in a particular person, and id is the immediate gratification, ego stands in between id and superego, and the superego is something which is more of ethical one, which tells us that we need to always resort to the right kind of path among different paths which may be available to us. That means, every human being has certain kind of expectation, certain human kind of urged, certain needs like sex, sleep, like a need for comfort, but this is what the id gives us to realize. Now, then comes the ego, which gives us different ways to meet our needs. That means, we have before us different ways and means to gratify our human needs, according to what the id dictates. And the ways are being shown by ego, that is the component of human personality. But among all the means and the ways which are available to us, it is the appropriate one, or the right kind of way that human being tends to adopt, and that is something dictated by superego. What Sigmund Freud is trying to explain through this theory is that every person needs to have a balanced development of id, ego and superego. If it is not well developed, or it is not developed in a balanced manner, so such kind of persons tend to commit more of criminal kind of activities, though they are more prone to criminal activities, though it may not be the explanation in all criminal behavior as such. Nevertheless, the whole criminological domain, we can say the Sigmund Freud analysis of id, ego and superego is very important and very significant. Now, then came another important theorist, and I think we can call him a group of theorists, John Dollard, Leonard Dobb, Neil Miller, O. H. Maurer and Robert Sears, who gave us a particular theory called frustration aggression theory. Now, what is this frustration and aggression theory? The frustration and aggression theory is all about the fact that the aggression is the result of frustration. That means, if we see crime to be an aggressive behavior, it is explained by this theory is that in a way that this aggression results from frustration that person may undergo. Now, it may so happen that if you get frustrated with something, you want to get aggressive, but then the person may be so powerful that you may not be able to get aggressive against him or her. In those cases, you may find some person who is an innocent victim, who can be victimized by you to show your aggression against that person. That means, in every situation, the person who is the cause of aggression may not be the victim of your, or who is the cause of your frustration may not be the victim of your aggression. There could be someone who is innocent. Most of the cases of domestic violence, if you look at, if the cases which are being reported or the cases which are being registered in police station, we often find. Now, there are situations in which the spouses, the husband may be frustrated because of many other factors, but it so happens that the aggressive behavior that the husband displays more often against his wife rather than any person, because she happens to be an innocent person who is staying with him. What I mean to indicate here is that this frustration aggression theory very aptly discusses or it explains certain situations such as domestic violence. Now, there are also situations that we find terrorist or the insurgent groups, they target innocent people. Now, their cause of frustration may not be those one whom they are targeting, maybe the children who have been killed in a bomb blast, maybe other people, innocent people who were in a market and there is a bomb blast, these people have been killed. But then it is not that they are the reason for their frustration. But what they want to indicate, or what the message they want to give to the people who are actually their causes or reasons for frustration, that see, this is what we can do. That means, in this particular case of aggression frustration, the target of aggressive behavior may be the source of aggression or someone who is innocent and may not be related to the situation. Now, Dollard even indicated that or pointed out that aggression could be manifested in many more socially accepted behaviors such as sports, gym, career in military, and so on and so forth. Now, after the discussion of the frustration aggression theory, there is another important theory that is called instinct theory of criminal behavior. And what is this instinct theory? There was somebody one called Lornes who gave this theory, wherein he approached the study of aggression from an ethological perspective following the study of animals. He proposed that aggression originates directly from an innate fighting instinct that evolved over generation owing to its benefit for the survival of the species. We have already discussed that the manner in which the human beings evolved over the period of time, the evolution of human beings. There are anthropological studies which says that we have human beings have evolved from other species, other animal species, because it may be because of that we still have a fighting instinct inside us. And according to this theory, the criminal behavior may be because, again, no theory can conclusively determine or conclusively establish that criminal behavior happens only because of their explanation or what is being explained. These are only probabilities which may able to explain criminal behavior in certain situation. Now, apart from the psychological theories that we have discussed, there are also other accounts given by other accounts of the psychological theories given by different theorists. For instance, one of the theorists state that the birth of a child has certain instinctive drives which demand satisfaction. If these drives are not satisfied adequately or suppressed, child may become more prone to criminal kind of a tendency in a later stage, and that is what is being stated, that it is a stage called latent delinquency. The child may absence of intimate relations with parents during childhood, that may also account to, or that may also be one of the factors for people to become deviant kind of nature. Then another theories state that emotional attachment to good parent, absence of which may lead to lack of or the weak superego, because emotionally unstable and frustrated needs if the child has. Now, the child might possible that he or she may develop certain deviant behavior. Now, the offending behaviors, another explanation of psychological theories is that the offending behaviors may also result from absence of close and continuous relationships with mother during its formative stages. That is one of the explanation. Now, in this context, I would like to inform you that the children of women prisoners, now we have the Supreme Court judgment which ruled that the children up to the age of 5 are permitted to live with such women prisoners, but beyond the age of 5 they are not permitted, because this is the phase or this is the age where the mother's attachment to a child is very, very important and crucial for the further development of the child. Now, this an important theory which is defective or abnormal mental processes may have a variety of causes, including inappropriate learning or proper conditioning. That is Skinner and Pavlov, which tried to explain this particular positive and negative reinforcement. So, similarly, there are other explanations in psychology, so far as the criminal or deviant behavior is concerned, but this is not to say that or this is not to state here that these were the only explanation. These were some of the ways to look at criminal behavior within the broader scope of psychology. Now, coming to the sociological explanation. In the sociological explanation, as I have already told you in the first lecture, that it can be broadly divided into social structural theories and the social process theories. The one theory, that is the cartographic theory or the cartographic school, they have related crime to through the mapping of crime to understand relationship between society and physical environment. That means, the very demographic factor could also be responsible for people to commit crime. The culture conflict theory given by Selin, who stated that rapid urbanization had placed the society in a state of conflict, wherein law essentially embodies the values or the normative structure of the dominant culture of or ethnic group. Now, if the criminal law or laws happens to reflect only the cultural values of a dominant class, obviously the not so dominant class may not be able to imbibe those values, and if in case they violate those values, these people are termed as criminal. That means, according to cultural conflict theory, crime norms reflects mostly the values of a group successful in achieving control over legislative process. As a result, less influential people often get conflict with those dominant values. Now, we also have the Chicago School of Crime, which says that the crime is the result or the outcome of social disorganization or the breakdown in the social structure and institutions such as family and schools. And because of such factors, and it so happened in the context of the industrialization which came up, which happened after that, lot of breakdown of the social institution or social structure happened, and this crime or the deviance primarily happened because of such situations. Then we also have this anomy and particular theory. One of the important theories called Robert Merton, who has given this anomy theory, and he held that the members of the society are placed in different strata in social structure, and social and cultural structures generate pressure for socially deviant behavior upon people variously located in the structure. That means, the structure itself is responsible so far as Robert Merton is concerned. Now, there are also theories like the containment theory so far as the social structure is concerned, but the social process theories are equally important. We have this important theory of given by Howard Baker, labeling theory, which state that crime happens because society has a tendency to label people as criminal more easily. That means, whenever we find that there are more crimes reported from a particular community or particular location or particular region, we tend to believe or perceive that everyone in the locations are criminals. If somebody commits a wrong, rather than giving a chance to reform that person, we happen to label that person as criminal and do not accept that person very easily. Now, such kind of labeling also is responsible for people to commit more crimes in the future, because people or such persons might think, so what if I commit crime? Even without committing crime, I have been perceived to be a wrong person. If I am a wrong person, there is no point for me to do good things, rather I should keep doing the wrong things. Persons who want to come out of practices such as commercial sex are not given that enabling environment at times to come out. Again, the reason being, society may not very easily accept society, I mean society at large. There may be people might accept them, I mean some segment of the society, but as a whole there could be some resistance. People who want to come from out of some kind of organizations which may be anti-establishment, they do not at times they are hesitant to come out, because the manner in which society looks at such people. So, labeling is something that is also very significant so far as the social process of crime is concerned. Then there comes another theory called shame and reintegrative theory, which says that the shaming for wrongdoing should be done in a manner which is more reintegrative rather than disintegrative. We have to be very careful about the manner in which we want to give a lesson to the person. We have to see to it that the person who has deviated or who has done something wrong needs to be reintegrated back to the society rather than disintegrate back to the society. That is why you will notice that nowadays the emphasis is more on restorative justice or reintegrative kind of justice rather than the earlier or the traditional ways of justice that happened. That means, we have to address such situations more from a reintegrative approach rather than disintegrative. In addition to the psychological and the sociological explanation of crime, we also have the economic explanation of crime, why people commit crime. And one of the theories here is the Bonger's theory of economic structure in crime. Now, this person called William Adrian Bonger, he wrote a book, An Introduction to Criminology, where he has discussed about the possible reasons, the economic reasons behind the commission of crime by the people. The basis of his work was the Marxist philosophy, and what he stated was that the criminal was a product of the capitalist society, and reason being the capitalist society tend to produce certain tendencies which are selfish in nature, and because of which the proletariat tend to be more of anti-bourgeoisie. That is, there is always a struggle between the bourgeoisie and proletariat. That is what the Marx held, and so is the theory given by William Adrian Bonger. He held the same theory, and he tried to apply to the crime in particular. And what he stated was that evils in the capitalist system are more conducive to the spread of criminal behavior. For instance, the child labor, that is the long hours of work by workers which have a brutalizing effect on them, illiteracy among the lower ranks of the labor class, they are more prone to such kind of criminal tendencies, because there is always a sense of alienation and deprivation which exists or which persists among the proletariat people. Now, to discuss about Adrian Bonger, we also need to refer to what is the Marxist ideology. As you all know, Karl Marx happens to be one of the most influential yet most controversial theories of human civilization. Now, the whole approach that the Marx gave brought about a paradigm shift towards the way of looking at society and social phenomena. The Karl Marx is, yes, the most controversial philosopher who gave a new approach to the study of society. However, his work was never very comprehensive. Rather, he dedicated his entire life or work to the cause of building a just and human society. In fact, Karl Marx was an extremely poor person who was often helped by his friend Friedrich Engels, who happened to be a socialist textile manufacturer. Even it is said that 3 of his children died because of malnutrition and poverty while living in the slums of England. But the only thing that Karl Marx possessed was a very high opinion about himself. Indeed, he was a person of encyclopedic reading. Now, he kind of gave a different way of looking at society, as I have stated, social phenomena, and the context in which he gave his theory was the rapid growth of factories massive uprooting of people from rural areas, minority of capitalists were making unprecedented wealth. That means, there was a situation where there was unprecedented prosperity in favor of the capitalists. And this Marx said that all human behavior is primarily determined by economic factors and not by conscience, which itself is influenced by economic experiences and surrounding. And the adverse position of proletariat because of the exploitation by the capitalists is responsible for the criminal tendencies or the deviant tendencies among such people, and that is how the Marx talk about the capitalism, and Bonger has derived heavily from Marx. And he said that poor were being exploited and crime rates were high, living conditions were poor, and they were political upheavals. And what Marx also held was that the modes of production, social, political, legal, spiritual, this these were part of the superstructure except the economic. Even the economic structure and all this the superstructure was also indeed shaped by the modes of production. Now, so far as the second step, if we keep it in a very triangular shape, at the top is the superstructure. In between comes the exchange and relations of production. That means the technical know-how, technical division of labor, economic structure of society, sum total of modes of production. These are the ones which come in between. Then comes at the third layer from the bottom. I mean, it is a triangle. At the top it is the superstructure, then comes the relations of production, then towards the end comes the forces of production, technology, labor, raw materials and capital. So, it is very dynamic in nature. So, to change the superstructure, that is the social, political, legal and spiritual, what is needed is to change the very basis or the forces of production. That is what Marx held, and even said that social beings determine conscience, that is the ideas, beliefs and laws, etc., and dominant class. I mean, people who have the control over the forces of production, they happen to be the dominating class, and their ideas in fact determines the the whole the structure or whole the pyramid or the triangle for that purpose, and that class controls the means of economic factors. They invariably legitimize inequality and hierarchy in the society. So, what he is trying to point out here is that the capitalist society, which is somewhat the bourgeoisie or the capitalist, and then we have the proletariat or the working class, and what is required is that change in the relations of production. If you want to change the manner in which the society functions, or if we want to change in the rates of crime that may happen, on the kind of tendencies of people to commit crime, it needs to be addressed. Now, what happens, and he also gave this particular theory called theory of alienation, where the Marx said that the worker is alienated from the product of his labor, since what he produces is appropriated by the capitalist and the worker has no control over it. And he or she is alienated because all the decisions pertaining to productions or how production is to be done is taken by the capitalist. For the worker, the labor ceases to offer an intrinsic satisfaction and instead becomes only a means of survival. Now, what in such a situation what happens is that it becomes a compulsion, force from without, and is no more an in itself. That means, the proletariat never enjoys the work, but then they are doing it because they have to do it for their survival, and as a result of which it may so happen that this class of people might form certain criminal tendencies or what we call as deviant tendencies. Now, these workers more or less in such a capitalist kind of society work for their self destruction, and if that is so, obviously, I mean, in any society which has got the tendencies of capitalism are more likely to see the criminal tendencies or the deviant tendencies among the proletariat class. To conclude or towards the end, I would also like to inform you that in addition to these mainstream theories, we have another emerging theory, that is the critical criminology, which state or which kind of propagate that genesis of crime or the underlying causes of crime, it lies within the class and status of the society. That means, it is because the crime happens because of inequalities in the society, and this particular theory is called critical because the proponents of this theory, namely Taylor, Wanton, Young, were critical about state's definition of crime. Now, according to this theory, the crime and punishment is connected to a system of social inequality and as the means of producing and perpetuating this inequality, because of which there is a tendency among certain segment of the society to commit crime, and the crime is the result of oppression of the workers, particularly the poorest section of the society and people who are less advantaged groups. I am again reiterating my point that no theory is complete in itself. These are the theories given by theorists from time to time, looking into or considering different contextual factors. Now, application of those theories would depend upon the conditions which are conducive or which are not conducive to a particular theory. Hope this discussion on the theories of crime is useful to all of you, and for a better understanding of these theories, I would also like you to relate it to our previous lecture on the schools of criminology, so that you have a complete understanding about criminology and crime as such. Thank you so much.